What I'm talking about here tonight is reconsidering the knee-jerk reaction to when you find an old code base, or maybe you've just walked into a new job and you see this and you say, right, I can do this better. I can rewrite it from scratch and it'll have better, cleaner architecture. It'll just be better. But sometimes you won't have a choice. Maybe your employers don't want to rewrite. They want you to keep the old code. So I'm going to talk about two possible situations here. So maybe this is just you and your side project, in which case you got a bit more freedom, but it also might be a team situation where you're working with other people. Now, it's not just me who sort of thinks about this stuff. Cleverer people do. So these guys were talking about it a couple of days ago. So what you got is you got a product and it's working, it's making you flour, but you've sort of dug yourself a little pit of debt, and you work, and a little further down the line, someone comes up as, can I have 2 flours, please? And you realize that, well, I don't know how. How do I do this? So you might ask, why are you going to do this to yourself? Swift, it's type safe, bugs fall out. It's a really good language. But you still need to spend the time building the code and building the architecture. And that will take a significant amount of time, because any non-trivial product has hidden complexity. Maybe not Yo, for example, but I think working with an existing code base gives you a deeper understanding of your product. You get new understanding as to what your product does, and because you're not battling to reproduce existing uses, it decreases the amount of cognitive load that you have to do to, it lets you focus on what your product does and just make a better architecture around that. So first rule is don't panic. You've got to say to yourself that this is possible. So you want to take your time, start slow, and understand the big problems. So whatever works for you. If it's a big whiteboard, one thing I read about is a bunch of people, they printed all their source code onto every single class had a single page, but they rescaled it so that each class sat on that single page. And as they started refactoring, they reprinted things, and eventually all their classes were readable. So something I thought I might use at some point in the future. Okay, first thing is honesty. You need to be honest with yourself and other people who you're working with. This process, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's going to take a long time, but it will probably take less time than creating this product from new. Now, I wrote Agile isn't your friend here. And I put a question mark after it because I was sort of thinking about it, thinking, well, maybe it is. Scrum is designed for face-to-face contact, interactions with other people. And then I thought maybe I just weren't corporate Agile is not going to be your friend here, in which case you might need to define things like time boxes for your management team. But all the while, you want to evaluate. You want to ask yourself, am I getting there? Am I getting to the final point? Is this going to turn into the final architecture that I want? But you always also want to ask, can this be done? You might reach the point of this code base is unrecoverable, and that's okay. But as long as you haven't given up first, Okay, so other thing you need to do is talk. Talk to your friends, talk to people on Slack. Other people may have solutions for what you're doing. It's you also need to get intent consensus in that if your other team members don't like what you're doing, inevitably it'll get rewritten in the future for no good reason. Use your stand-ups, right? So stand-ups, they're not status checks, they're people checks. So you can say, you know, I'm confused, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm having a really good day today. It's a way of sharing. But all the while, keep your focus, keep your eye on your prize. So you can iterate and improve once you have a stable architecture, but your goal here is to not break business rules, not break user journeys. So seriously, get all medieval on your feature set, rip stuff out if you can. So this may involve talking to your product people, but it's sort of like when you take your car to the garage and they fix it up and then they give you a box full of parts. Say, yeah, you don't need these anymore. You put them in the back of the garage and just leave them alone. Yeah, be present. It's if you don't have time to spend dedicated hunks of your day working on this, possibly you're not the right person to be doing this job. It requires deep focus on the entire project, because at times you'll be pulling it apart and breaking it for days at a time and then putting it back together again. So if you can't afford that time, then possibly this is not the task for you. It's hard work. It's not creative. It's not spectacular. You're going to be running into loops of change. So you pull something apart a little bit, change it, then a couple of days later you might go back and pull it apart some more. Use your peer review system if you can. If you're on your own, obviously you're only going to be reviewing your own stuff. But just work with what you got. So if you've got an internal testing lane, possibly you can get builds out to there as well. You can use desk review. You can explain to your colleagues, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing. Now, for reviewers, respect the person who's working. So try not to be that person. When I say that, what I mean is that most things can be done in many ways, and endlessly bike shedding over a feature is not going to get you to your endpoint. So sometimes it's just let it go. Is what I'm trying to say. And equally, developers, you need to respect your reviewers. So wrap up your pull requests. So if you've got a find replace mission, which you want to give to a reviewer, just do that. Make sure all your changes are atomic units. But always, questions you want to ask of your changes. How does this reduce the coupling between things? How does this embody single responsibility principle? Does it now have meaningful tests? And more or less, is it good enough? Can I iterate in the future on this? Now, there's never any need to throw everything away, but you want to evaluate your dependencies, look at all your pods or your or the repos that you bring in. Look at them. Are they stale? Have they last been updated with iOS 9? You know, and also, does that matter? There's going to be lots of good stuff. You just want to take the edges off and move on. Okay, I'm going to get into a few opinions here, but Obj-C is not a bad word. Swift is not intrinsically going to make your code better. So if your only reason for rewriting something that's in Obj-C is that it's in Obj-C, don't. Any time you spend doing this does not get you close to your endpoint. Definitely rewrite if it's going to fix systemic issues or it will facilitate testing. But sort of don't be afraid of old code. Definitely do go and clean up your Obj-C. So you can add your bridging names, your non-null bookends, because what this does for you is it cleans up the API. It removes up all the force unwraps that appear if you don't use the non-null bookends. So protocols are your friend. You're going to be using them to carve away pieces out of unwieldy objects. So once you've got a piece, you can hide it away behind a protocol and then change it in the future. This also increases the ability to mock when you're in test. So what are you going to see? So you're going to be wandering around your code base and you might see, well, user profile view controller. This obviously shows a user profile. So you go diving into it. And what you find, there's a whole universe inside there. It's like you've got a bit of networking, bit of logic, you know. You might have a black hole, which is a Singleton, which is the local database. You might have a bit of state. And this thing's just a view controller. It shouldn't be doing anything, right? Other than making a view. So your typical patterns, I guess, that you're going to have to contend with are all of these. And there's lots of different approaches to deal with them. This is just a sample. So I will be doing a session at NS Spain which kind of explains how to deal with some of these issues. Now, what I was going to say is that if you have encountered KVO, walk away. Most of the time you want to walk away. If somebody's gone and used KVO as a central messaging system, you may find it's too tightly bound to be ripped up. It's really hard to kill. Cool. How's everyone going at the moment? Anyone got any questions or something? Cool. God object is when you get an object, everybody uses it, it's got millions of abilities, it holds the data, it's basically everything. It's super singleton. One of the worst ones I ever came across was like a singleton which vended singletons. So that was kind of cool. But always ask why you're doing this process. And it's not really sort of, oh God, why? But you want to ask, why are these things coupled? What does this object need to do? And why is this object doing all these things? You're looking to just pull things apart so you can put them back together again in a sensible way. So state your underlying goals and stick to them. Maybe even put it in front of you. So you're just trying to decouple, get single responsibility into your objects, increase the injectability of objects, testability, which I'm not even sure is a word, and practice clean architecture. What that means to you is different things, but in the end, it generally means that anyone who walks into this project in the future can reuse it, rebuild it, and extend it. So what you want to do is avoid feature creep. So while you're working on this, you're going, wouldn't it be cool if we used core ML to do the JSON parsing? Or, wouldn't it be cool if we had an animated box here with a giraffe jumping over it? There's lots of cool things you can add to your app, but this does not get you to your endpoint. Don't lose focus. This is the most important thing, really, is add tests. If your project does not have a test sequence yet, you've got to add one. If it doesn't have CI, definitely time to add it as well. Like tests describe how you want your environment to be and how you want it to stay. So if you're pulling a chunk of code out, you want to be able to make sure that you can test that in the future. Now, mostly you'll be testing in Swift, and that's fine. But again, don't be afraid of Obj-C. One thing it does have, Obj-C does have, is mocking. And I know Swift does have fake mocking, but it always feels a bit sort of unwieldy because you're having to build boilerplate code. So if you've got a situation where some testing in Obj-C would work, give it a go. You might like it. Definitely do use your BDD style frameworks for more sort of user case style testing. So for me, unit tests, they're quick and easy. They test a specific logic point. Whereas I might use BDD. I use nimble and quick in Swift because otherwise your names start getting very unwieldy. So you can set up stacks in context of testing. So for example, as a user, I want to see my login name, or as a user, I want to delete my profile. I also think you get cleaner asynchronous expressions by using the eventually part of things, but I think that's nimble, at which you could probably just use straight with XCTest as well. Your source control should work for you, not you working for it. So you're going in a straight line, right? Well, you hope you are. So the less you have to do with your source control other than just commit at any time you like. Just do it. Now, the problem is if you've got a mainline that is still maintained and is still being worked on, you might have to start cherry picking fixes or merging from the mainline. But the longer you stay off the mainline is the further away you'll be. And it gets harder and harder, which is also, again, a reason for the focus. So you try and get this done. It's going to take as long as it takes, but again, do it as quick as you can. And again, there's no shame in git reset hard. It doesn't matter if you spent 2-3 days on something and it's just not working, just let it go, move on, drop it, try again. You want to use your newest SDKs. So if you're currently targeting iOS 12, the earliest deploy you probably want to do is iOS 11. Now, understand this probably doesn't apply to certain niches and certain products, but if you look at your deploy rates for iOS, it tends to flatten out at about 20% after a couple of months. So you can generally drop it off. You can replace homebrew kind of stuff from the old days with newer iOS provided components. Stuff like XE asset catalogs can replace custom color catalogs. If you've got a document browser, you can replace that. I really like storyboards. Some people don't, but I feel they represent things visually, and they also give you access to the size class variance, which is sometimes a bit unwieldy in code. And they can also let you set up a framework for a code manipulated change as well. So it's not a sin to use storyboards. That's an opinion. Now the thing is, because you're not rewriting, you've given yourself bandwidth to add localization and accessibility, and these things are really important. It's if you don't have them, you're missing out on a big opportunity. It's almost a situation where you could use multiple people on a project on a refactor, whereas so you take a piece of code, then you send it down the line to be audited for localization and accessibility. So how many people do you want to spend on this or devote to this? Well, obviously, if it's just you, it's just you. But you and your imaginary friend. I work by myself, so I've only got the birds to talk to. It depends. For heavy changes, you may need to bottleneck back to one person. Again, you're going to be breaking your code base for multiple days at a time in places. And if you've got multiple people, they're going to have to accept that they can't do any work until this change comes back into the branch. I think 2 or 3 people could communicate well enough, but any more than that, you're probably pushing your luck. And I have tried with like 4 or 5, and it just was a horrible thing because we were all colliding with each other. So when do you say no? I think you'll know is the key here. It's if you got toxic code or toxic patterns, basically something that can't be pulled apart, that's too dependent, too coupled. At this point, you may say, well, yes, this is worth rewriting, and you'll probably be right. Or you're converting to a very different pattern. So this is not a way to go from MVC to Viper or reactive. Again, these sort of situations where you'd want to start from fresh. Or super old code. So old retain release, auto release Obj-C, or lots of core foundation. So basically focus on what you're trying to do. So what you're trying to do is produce a product that did what it did before, but that can now be changed. Do improve bad user experience, do improve small bugs. I call them paper cuts. But anything that you do that does not contribute to the endpoint, it's just wasting time. Well, it's wasting time in a certain perspective. So I do it all the time to myself. It's like I was trying to ship just last week, and I just sunk a whole day into looking into a new feature. I thought, oh, this would be cool. But in the end, I just thought, oh, hang on, I want to get this out the door. I can do this next time. So just remember, this will take as long as it takes, but don't forget to ship it. You've got to get it out the door at some point in time. So while I was doing this is all kind of interconnected. It's not just a line. This is like the mind map I did, and sort of it all came back to certain key points. Is like how do you get to know, or how do you know when it's wrong? And there's all sorts of routes to that point. So, anyone got any questions or comments? No, yeah, I do my flows there, but again, they must obey the single responsibility principle. If you start getting storyboards which look like like mind maps, exactly, it's you've gone the wrong way. Storyboards, they can contain a single flow, and you can use embedding just to connect them across. Cool. Anyone else? Awesome. Oh, thank you very much for listening, and maybe I'll see you in the future. Thank you.